We got a special guest, Joe Giglio. We're going to talk with him from BetQL Daily. Coming up here in a second. Also Monday Night Football, 17-10 at the half. San Francisco, 10.5-point favorites on the live line. Total 48.5. McCaffrey over receiving yards, cashes. Right?
It did.
George Kittle over longest reception, cashes, and the receiving yards. The only problem was Deebo Samuel under 4.5 receptions.
DeAndre Hopkins over
6.5
receptions, cashes in the first half. So we're a winning squad tonight.
He goes over. We welcome in now, though, Joe Giglio. You hear him every day with Joe Ostrowski. Well, sometimes. Aaron Hawksworth, of course. But Joe,
flu right now.
A little under the weather right now. Joe, let's actually start with some Major League Baseball, the Phillies, because Joe O and I were huge believers in the Phillies this season. You not so much. So how do you feel now that you've had a couple weeks to kind of digest? Because you had the 2-1 series lead. I thought they were going to win the World Series. PJ, we were saying the same thing.
We did.
We just thought that was a team of destiny, man. There's no shame in losing to the Astros. That's one of the better teams here the last decade. But, man, your thoughts on the ride this season? Because it looked like it was going to be an absolute disaster the first
It did. I mean, So Joe O and you were on them early, and I was like, they're too flawed. The defense stinks. I just didn't believe they could be that good. I kind of thought they'd be what they were, like an 86, 87 win team. Obviously, they got in and made a crazy run. But I was there at Game 3, guys, after they won and hit all those home runs, and I was like, holy bleep, they're going to win the World Series. Like, this team's, they stink. They're going to win the World Series. And then it just went the other way. And, like, I was Game 5. Remember Game 5 had that many chances they had to win? That was the game I was like, they just lost the World Series in Game 5. I didn't think they were going back to Houston and winning 2 in a row. So I got over it, but, man, when you get that close to winning a World Series as an underdog, you just got to finish it. So it's tough.
Was it interesting, too, like, Bryce Harper, incredible run, like one of the best runs I've ever seen in a postseason. And then you find out, like, oh, yeah, he was actually hurt the whole time, too.
Yeah, I mean, he was amazing. I mean, the numbers he put up, like we'll talk about that for a long time, that kind of October he had. And you're right. So it's funny, the Phillies had such a run of luck because they changed the rule to add an extra playoff team this year and the DH and the NL because he couldn't throw after April. He hurt that elbow in April. They tried to rehab it. It took time off. But without the DH, he wouldn't have played the entire time. And you're right. I mean, obviously, none of us are doctors. I don't know how he did it, though, because you would think he has a torn ligament in his elbow. I guess it's just like the opposite motion, swinging versus throwing. But it's crazy he did what he did with a torn ligament in his elbow.
Joe, I've always wondered what the pecking order of, like, Philly sports is when they're all at their peak. The Eagles are obviously one.
Yep.
But, like, who's...
Are they really?
Oh.
Just because of football?
Oh,
always.
Oh,
Yeah.
Always one.
Over the Sixers?
Everything.
Easily.
Yeah.
So who's two, would you say? Is it the Flyers, the Phillies, or the Sixers when they're all rolling?
It's the Phillies when they're good.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Like when the Phillies are good, baseball is number 2. I would say Sixers 3, like NBA 3, and then hockey's like a distant 4th. Mostly because the Flyers haven't been relevant for decades, it feels like. Really relevant. But, yeah, I mean, the Eagles are just –
Yeah.
It's almost like it's like a college football town, but like how crazy they are about their team, that's the way everyone is about the Eagles of Philadelphia.
How do you feel about the Eagles? Because the NFC, obviously a down year, Tampa Bay. I still actually could see Tampa Bay making a run, but Green Bay's done. The Rams are done. The Cowboys look damn good, obviously. What do you think their ceiling is? I mean, do you think this team's good enough to go to and win a Super Bowl with Jalen here year 2?
Yeah, I think they can win the Super Bowl. I mean, if you ask me, are they going to win the Super Bowl? I wouldn't pound the table and say yes, they're going to win it. But I think they could get there and win it. I mean, I think top to bottom, they're the best roster in the NFL. I mean, it's a matter of do they play their best in that moment? Does Jalen play his best in that moment? But I mean, I was like last night I was thinking about like their defensive line with all the additions they made with Sue and Linval Joseph. Yeah. It might be the most accomplished defensive line I've ever seen on paper. I mean, they got Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Linval Joseph, Ndamukong Suh. I mean, they're crazy good. And then like a guy like Jordan Davis, a first-round pick, will probably be a Pro Bowler in his own right one day. I mean, they're really loaded at the best positions. I think it's a team that can win the Super Bowl.
I thought the Sue pickup was huge, man, because everybody's talking about, like, I thought that's what Dallas actually needed, because you look at these teams that just can't stop the run, and that's, like, the only concern I have. Because I was going to ask you really quick, like, what would be, like, if the Eagles don't make the Super Bowl or don't go to the NFC title game, what do you think the flaw would be, or what do you think it would be that would cost them? The run defense?
Run defense, I would say. I would also say inexperience at coaching quarterback. Yeah. I mean, they really haven't done this, right? Like, they got to the playoffs last year. I like Sirianni, but he makes some weird decisions sometimes. And then can Jalen throw them back into a game against a really good defense. Yesterday he had a big fourth quarter, but the Colts aren't very good, right?
No.
Like, can he? If they're down 14 in the second half against the Bills in the Super Bowl, against the Chiefs, can he win that game? I don't know yet. Maybe.
And that was a low-scoring game against an offense that really sputters pretty much consistently as well. Do you think Nick Sirianni, personality-wise, like embodies Philly?
Yeah, I mean, he's screaming at the other crowd yesterday.
Yes,
People love him in Philadelphia. Yes,
I love him.
Yeah,
I love him.
He's kind of like a hothead on the sideline. He's a good coach. It's interesting. There's not many coaches like him these days because he gave up play calling last year. So he's an offensive guy who doesn't call plays, right? He's not the defensive guy. Like, he's like a CEO, but he's not Mike Tomlin. He's not John Harbaugh. Sometimes people are like, what does he do? But obviously he does something right because they've won, like, I think 14 of their last 18 regular season games. He's a good coach.
Yeah.
I want to talk college hoops with you. Do you remember, was like when Jay Wright said he was retiring, was that like a day that Philly fans like remember where they were? Because they knew like Villanova basketball just probably wouldn't be the same for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, and did anybody like have any idea? Because I'm never shocked.
That came out of nowhere.
That one actually shocked me.
Yeah, it did come out of nowhere. And he's still pretty young. I mean, Jay Wright's in his early 60s.
Yeah.
He's beloved. Like, you asked the pecking order earlier. College basketball is certainly lower than the pro sports, but he's so respected, Jay Wright. Everyone I've ever met who knows him says, like, he's such a good guy. He's run a clean program. It's weird he's not part of it anymore. And then they lost to Temple last week. Like, their first game without Jay Wright.
Yeah.
It's still weird to me that he's not the coach because it's been so long and it's been such an amazing program.
During March Madness, what's the vibe in Philly with Villanova's dominance?
It's almost like people don't pay attention during the regular season because it's just expected. Then it's like, oh, yeah, this guy's one of the great coaches ever, and people respect him, and they want to talk about it. It was when they won their first one with that great shot they had, it was like a culmination for Jay Wright because finally he got over the hump.
Yeah. So what about, obviously, the 76ers? I played Embiid to win the MVP, thinking they didn't give it to him last year. If he could stay healthy.
Never.
Got off to a slow start.
Let me ask you this, actually. Let me hold on.
Are you asking me or Joe?
No, I'm asking Joe. Do you think there's a possibility
that Embiid wins the
that
MVP?
Embiid gets traded somewhere like to Miami, to a place where he wants to be with dogs? Because it feels like right now the recipe isn't working, and he's got injury concerns, and it feels like his sort of timeline, that window, is very narrow.
Yeah, I would say if he wants out, that's how it happens. I mean, Darren Moore is not going to trade Joel Embiid.
No.
But Tristan, I wouldn't be shocked if one day he's the one that asks out. It's been a very weird career with him, right? So many different pieces around him, and it never seems to be the right fit. I would not be surprised if he ends his career somewhere else. It just feels like, isn't that the NBA these days, too?
Yeah.
I mean, how many of these guys stay their whole career in one place? I mean, Steph's probably going to be the only one.
Especially without rings.
Right.
It's true.
Almost no one without a ring that's a franchise-altering player doesn't move.
Yeah.
So you don't have high expectations, I'm guessing, for this season?
I mean, look, James, the next time James Harden wins something, it'll be the first time. I do like Tyrese Maxey. I mean, he's a good player. Now, he's hurt.
Yeah.
I think Doc Rivers gets fired at some point. He's probably the fall guy for all of this.
Yeah. I think he should. I mean, do you think, because we were actually talking about this like 2 weeks ago, because you look at Doc Rivers and you look at the resume, and he won an NBA championship years ago.
Yeah, like 15 years ago. Yeah.
And since then, he's blown how many 3-1 leads? I don't understand what it is, like why it seems like he's like bulletproof, though, because these seasons always end in disastrous fashion for you guys, for Philly fans. It's Simmons and Embiid can't get on the same page, and you give that money to Tobias Harris. Sometimes I forget he's even on the floor.
It's $37 million a year.
I like Tobias, man, but I forget he's even on the freaking team sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just feel like Doc almost gets a free pass because he's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
Looked at.
Well, he doesn't get into Philadelphia. People are done with Doc Rivers. They want him fired yesterday. And it's funny, a thing started a year ago where no one wants to call him Doc anymore because he doesn't.
Call him all Glenn.
Yeah, it's Glenn Rivers because there's one Doc in Philadelphia and it's not him. Yeah, he's Glenn.
Because of Howard-esque.
Yes, Howard.
He's like leading the charge. What is, for people who don't know and they don't listen to Philadelphia sports radio, how would you describe it?
Like, like when you walk down like a hallway here or something and you hear that person who's just giving you the raw like emotion, like, he sucks. I hate that guy. He's the worst. That's every day in Philadelphia. Like last week, so the Eagles were undefeated, right? They hadn't lost a game in 300 days to go back to the playoff game last year.
Yeah.
The day after the loss, we were talking about should they fire the defensive coordinator. See,
this is what I'm talking about.
That's Philadelphia.
I always stick up for it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love the Philadelphia. That's the attitude I love.
But then why do you not like the New York market? Because New York is the same.
Because it's New York.
Yeah, no one
likes.
likes.
Boston's
the
same
Knicks
way.
to me
Because
will always
they
just be the
actually
team
win.
that the Bulls bounced in the second round in a gentleman's sweep. Well, all I would hear about is Ewing and Starks, and they'd run their. I'm a Bulls fan. So they'd run their mouth, and then they'd get.
But it's not like
Jordan
Philadelphia doesn't run their mouth. It's not like they're winning.
We just talked about Embiid.
Yeah, but they was winning stuff.
Here's a comp for you. Joel Embiid is the Patrick Ewing of this era. He's a great player. Do I deep down think they're going to win a title with Joel Embiid? Probably not. He reminds me of Patrick Ewing.
Do you think Joel Embiid will ever be the best player on a championship team?
I don't. So a couple years ago when Giannis, obviously you remember that, when Giannis did what he did.
Yeah.
Do you ever think Joel will be healthy enough and physically fit enough to do what Giannis did in June?
I hate to say this, I don't think he has the dog in him.
I don't think so either.
Giannis treats Game 76 like it's Game 7 of the NBA Finals, man. Like, he never wants to sit. They have to force him to use his load management.
Yeah.
I mean, he scored 50 in the NBA Finals in a clinching win.
Is it hard, though, to, question Joel Embiid's dog when he has an orbital bone fracture and a torn ligament in his thumb, and he's, still out there?
That was a couple years ago. Remember that?
Bubble guts?
Yeah.
No, but, he obviously didn't have to play in those playoffs, so he fights through a lot, but then you're like, but you also complain about it a lot, and you get kind of taken out of your game. So, physically has dog, but, mentally doesn't have
I think
dog?
you said it, right? He obviously has physical toughness. Yeah. I mean, he came back from a lot of injuries, and you said he played through an orbital bone. And last year he's playing through the thumb that was dislocated. He's very physically tough, but doesn't it just feel like when things go sideways, he crumbles? That one game against Miami last year, he's didn't show up. Yeah. And then, I thought he was upset he didn't win the MVP. It's I don't know about his mental toughness.
When you watch games, do you, just picture, oh, man, the radio tomorrow is going to be unbearable?
Of course.
Philadelphia
but he loves that. You want that.
But it's the only market where I'm watching a game, and I'm like, oh, if the Eagles lose this game to the Colts, the Philadelphia radio tomorrow is just going to be on. And it's the only city I think that way. And when you're watching games.
New York's that way, too.
But Philadelphia, I feel like, is a whole nother level.
Yeah, I think New York, Boston, Philadelphia have similarities, right? It's people are going to lose their minds if there's a lot.
I don't know, man. As crazy as this sounds, Packers season in Titletown, Green Bay, they win 12, 13 games every year, and every year when the season ends, everybody needs to be fired. Everybody's done with Rodgers. They're ready for
the expectation is Super Bowl.
Jordan Love. Yeah, the expectation is Super Bowl or bust. Who do you actually trust in the AFC? I'm sticking with the Chiefs. Is it the Bills for you? Is it the Dolphins after they add Bradley Chubb a couple weeks back? Because I feel like the NFC, it's like the Cowboys, the Eagles, right? But in the AFC, you can make the case for maybe 5-6 teams. Who is it for you?
Yeah, it's the Chiefs because of Andy and Mahomes. Yeah. Don't we just look for reasons why Mahomes isn't the best quarterback? Yeah. Oh, it's Josh Allen now, or it's Lamar Jackson. No, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's been the best player in the sport for 5 years. It's them, but I also think Baltimore is interesting. I mean, they've had a 10-point lead in every game this season.
See, Paige?
Joe, I keep telling them they're not going to win a Super Bowl because of their offensive coordinator. When they won it back in 2012, Greg Roman, they're not going to win it because of him. He's the thing. They had Lamar throw the ball 35 times yesterday in that weather, and that's just not a recipe for success. I wish they would turn into the Tennessee Titans. The Titans know what they are every week. They run the ball. They have an identity. The Ravens, it's like 1 week they throw Lamar 17 times. The next they throw him 37. Against Tampa Bay, he threw the ball 30 times in the first half. Then they started running the ball in the second half, and they blew away with the game.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is going to be their downfall is their OC. When they won the Super Bowl in 2012, they fired Cam Cameron. Jim Caldwell came aboard, and it changed the entire season. If they don't make that change, they don't win the Super Bowl, and I think if they don't make a change with Roman, they're not going to win.
I like Miami, but it feels like a year away. Right? Doesn't it feel like it? Miami reminds me of...
The secondary is nonsense.
Remember when McVay took over the Rams, and they had that big first year, but they lost in the playoffs, and the next year they went to the Super Bowl? I could see Miami next year being that team.
Yeah, I agree.
Who would be your coach of the year in the NFL? Besides Sirianni. You can't say Sirianni.
Yeah, I'm not going to. Dable's done a great job. I would think I got to be the mix. But I'll tell you, if the Seahawks win the NFC West, I vote Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll, man.
I mean, that team was supposed to win 4 or 5 games.
Yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah, and look at how they're doing it. Like, the defense looked historically bad, and now they're like 4th in DVOA.
Their last 4 weeks, number 1 in yards per play allowed, with all those rookies.
Doesn't make any sense. Geno Smith. I'm with you. I'd be all for Pete Carroll.
I like Mike McDaniel a lot. If for some reason Miami makes a push, maybe they end up winning the AFC East. They could. Yeah, I mean, you never know. Especially Buffalo, all that weather, all that travel.
Yeah, the thing about Miami, they're going to, in shootouts, they're going to score points. The problem is the secondary.
They
Xavier
give up
Howard,
a lot of points.
Yeah, they give up 440 yards per game.
And Byron Jones has been injured. I think he's still sort of questionable for this week. It's a really, really interesting year in the NFL.
It is.
Joe, thanks so much. Joe Giglio, you'll hear him tomorrow. BetQL Daily. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back. BetMGM tonight.